Have you been told that you have psychophysiological insomnia? Has that made you kind of scared and worried because that's a big word and sounds kind of strange to you? Well, if so, this video is for you because we are going to look at what this is and see how we can arrive at a place where we're sleeping really, really well, no matter what we've been told. Now, if you haven't been told that you have psychophysiological insomnia, still plenty of here to learn because we're going to look at sort of the traditional model and really identify what I think of as the missing link. And so to summarize, we are going to look at sort of the definition of psychophysiological insomnia and the idea behind this diagnosis. And we're going to look at the missing link, of course, and how to meet psychophysiological insomnia as well. Those are the three things we're going to look at today. And as always, nothing here is medical advice. Yes, I happen to be a sleep doctor. I've used this diagnosis many, many times. I'm quite familiar with it, but this is just general thoughts and general tips for anyone that's tuning in here. So with that said, yeah, let's jump in here and look at the definition and idea. And so I want to share a screen with you. I actually Googled this and I found this website is from Science Direct. It's kind of neat because they have like multiple definitions from multiple sources. So I thought we can look at, I think, four of them. Firstly, is from Encyclopedia of Sleep, 2013, where a chapter by Perlis and Gurman, and where they say the following: it is presumed to have one here, an insidious or acute onset known precipitant. And I want to say that that part I completely agree with. That the struggle with sleep often, most of the time, I would say somebody says this happened, and that's really after which it started. But it can also be insidious, which is somebody saying like I always had it, even since a child, I had some trouble sleeping. It's kind of always been there. It's now it's just more intense than it was before. That part I think is very, very true. But then they say, well, two, they say an adult onset. Well, I think that's pretty common. But then they say three, a chronic and unremitting course, which is very, very scary and alarming. And I totally disagree with that. Like insomnia is not at all something chronic. It's just a matter of understanding what's happening. And when the fear goes away, there's no struggle at all. So I just want to point this out that, this makes it so clear why somebody telling you have psychophysiological insomnia and reading this can be like really alarming and really depressing, frankly. And so let's look at another one. This is from, I think, the same Encyclopedia of Sleep, but other authors, Gallion and Martin. And they said something here that I thought was, pretty true here. A pathological cycle develops in which the more the patient tries to sleep, the greater the anxiety and agitation, and the less the patient is able to initiate sleep. I think this is very, very true that the cycle of insomnia is very, very much one of like the more we try to sleep, the less we sleep. But then they say the result of this cycle is that the sleep environment itself has significantly weakened ability to stimulate sleep. Here we see the idea that when we sleep, it is because we place ourselves in our sleep environment, and that environment sort of makes us sleepy and makes us sleep, and that changes when we have psychophysiological insomnia. And I think that is completely untrue and leads to some very tricky territory when we start to like manipulate the environment and manipulate things when we don't fully understand what's going on. So it's interesting. We see like there's part of these things that I think are completely true and parts of them that are really tricky. Very similarly, we saw here in this definition from Neurology and General Medicine from Bruce Fish, 2008. They say psychophysiological insomnia usually develops out of a period of stress in which anxious thoughts keep the patient awake. After several nights, increased concern over inability to sleep develops. Thereafter, a vicious cycle develops in which worry over the inability to sleep keeps the patient awake. Again, I think this part is very, very true. We have some type of stress, and then we become worried about sleeping, and then the worry about sleep keeps us from sleeping. But then, again, they go into, as the insomnia develops, simple activities performed routinely before going to bed, like brushing the teeth, became associated with an inability to sleep and eventually become a conditioned response. The idea is that the things we were doing before sleep and that were associated with sleep now become associated with being awake, and we have to break this cycle. There is a missing link here. There's something missing. And I was thinking of sharing this fourth one too, but it's really sort of the same thing. This is from Judith Owens, 2008. And we can just briefly say that they here talk about something I think is helpful. They say this type of insomnia frequently is a result of presence of predisposing factors, such as, our genes, etc. and then there is a perpetuating factor, and then there's a precipitating factor and a perpetuating factor. And that part, I think, has a lot of validity. The idea there's that basically something happens, there's some stress, and or it's before that, some of us are more like type A, maybe a little bit more prone to worry. Some of us are more kind of like easygoing. But the person who is sort of like has a predisposition to worry is a little bit more likely to have struggle with sleep at some point. But that, that doesn't mean they have to have that. That just can explain to somebody why they have it. That's the predisposing factors. And then a precipitating factor is that stress, and the perpetuating factor is really trying to avoid not sleeping, is what I believe. But in this definition they have, they go into like the perpetuating factors are like drinking coffee and like watching TV too late, which I think has nothing to do with insomnia. So anyway, we spent a little time here on the back, more than I intended. But anyway, I think it gives a good idea of why there is so much confusion and why it can be so scary to be told like you have psychophysiological insomnia. But basically, to summarize these ideas, we see that the word psycho comes from like psychological stress, like stress, and we were aware of being stressed, and physiological comes from this idea that there's a new subconscious association happening after the stress, which is this like linking the bed with alertness, linking brushing the teeth with not sleeping, right? That's the idea behind psychophysiological insomnia. So it would be something like this: Mary had a health scare, that's the stress. She slept little, which is typical when we're stressed, right? Then she started to link the bed with not sleeping, and going to bed became a cue for wakefulness instead of sleep. That's the whole idea behind psychophysiological insomnia. And we can see that this becomes very, very tricky, because when we think that, oh, my insomnia has to do with like the bedtime, my linens, my sheet, the lighting, the caffeine, it just leads to more struggle. And because the more we try to manipulate those things, the more we actually struggle. And when we understand the missing link, we're going to see why that is. So let's go to the missing link here. And the missing link is really falling in my mind. We have an ongoing struggle with sleep when our brain has started to think of wakefulness as a threat, as something dangerous. And this we don't see in the definitions we just looked at. This understanding that there is that it is like the understanding that there is a misunderstanding in the brain is not present. And the way I think of it, and the way we think of it, within NATO, is insomnia is best understood as a form of phobia. It has a very similar nature to a phobia. For example, somebody can become scared of an insect randomly. Maybe they had a health scare and also saw an insect. Who knows? But they saw this insect and started being like, "Oh, this is dangerous for me." Even though we sort of cognitively know that insects are not dangerous, we can become scared of them. We can be scared of balloons. We can be scared of all kinds of things. And the thing is that when it comes to being scared of something that actually isn't dangerous, like insects, generally speaking, the more we try to avoid insects, the more we don't want to hear about them, see them, or we don't want to be near them, the more we avoid them. We just reinforce the idea that there is something to be scared of, which actually intensifies our phobias, right? So using Mary as an example, again, in our context, or in our model, we would say something like this: Mary had a health scare. She slept little. All that is the same. Her brain then identified not sleeping, which is the same as being awake, as a threat, as something dangerous. Then trying to avoid the threat by stopping to watch TV, by stopping to drink coffee or whatever it is, trying to avoid the threat, reinforced that a danger existed, and this creates this phobia cycle. The more things we try, including like supplements and gadgets, the more we try, the more we reinforce that there is a threat and a danger, and the more trouble sleeping we have. Which takes us now to this third part, like how do we meet this when we find ourselves in an insomnia cycle? How do we meet this? I said how to meet psychophysiological insomnia because that's what we're talking about here. But really, A for me out of two, there's A and B here. A for me is understand that insomnia is just a surface manifestation of fear. It's just like we have palpitations when we're scared. Insomnia is something like sleeping less. It's something that just happens when we're scared. There's nothing more mysterious to it than that. And when we understand that, there's nothing more behind this big word. And that big word, by the way, psychophysiological insomnia in itself, that understanding is quite problematic and not true that itself can relieve us of so much worry, so much worry. We see there's nothing strange or unusual here happening at all. That is so helpful. And then B here, I think is really befriending wakefulness, which is teaching the brain that being awake is not dangerous. It's not harmful in any way. And this is similar to, if you go back to the idea that insomnia it can be understood as a phobia. It's similar to what's called exposure therapy. Somebody who's afraid of insects again, they do well when they start actually being willing to see insects, maybe touch them, maybe learn about them. And that's the way they understand that, oh, there's nothing dangerous here, and the fear goes away, and then there's no more struggle. Same thing with wakefulness. We can teach ourselves that wakefulness is nothing dangerous, and and that you can do by just perusing this channel, because it's really all about this. You can check the playlists if you're new to the channel, specifically the This Is Natto playlist, as well as the Success Stories playlist, where you hear stories of people who've done just this, befriended wakefulness. So I hope this will be really, really helpful to you, particularly if you've been worried about psychophysiological insomnia. All the answers really, I believe, are here for you to find. However, if you find yourself scared, confused, bewildered, you're not feeling like yourself, and you would like to just put your head down, sleep well, feel like a normal person, feel whole again, feel like yourself again, and you like some support on the path, then we'd be super happy to help you. Just head over to thesleepcoachschool.com and find a coaching option that would work well for you. If you do that, I look forward to seeing you on the other side. With that said, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and look forward to having you back here real soon. Until then, take it easy.